My name is Brad Thompson, and I'm 38 years old. I've been a truck driver for nearly 15 years, based out of Omaha, Nebraska. The open road has always been my escape miles of asphalt, truck stops, and the occasional radio chatter from other drivers. This one trip, though, still haunts me. It was late, around 11 p.m. I had a long haul ahead of me, heading toward Chicago. The night was unusually quiet, and the road felt endless. The only sound was the hum of my engine, and the occasional rumble strip when I drifted too close to the edge. I was tired, but nothing a cup of coffee wouldn't fix. About 2 hours into the drive, I noticed something on the shoulder of the road, a car with its hazard lights blinking. As I got closer, I saw a young woman standing beside it. She looked desperate, waving her arms frantically. Normally, I wouldn't stop. I've heard too many stories about setups or people faking emergencies. But something about her seemed genuine. Maybe it was the way her face looked pale under the dim glow of her car lights. I couldn't leave her out there alone. I pulled over a little ways ahead of her car, and she ran up to my truck as soon as I stopped. Her clothes were damp, like she'd been outside for a while. Thank you, she said out of breath. My car just died, and I don't have any signal to call for help. She looked young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair that clung to her face from the moisture in the air. She seemed nervous, her hands shaking as she wiped her face. I hesitated for a second, but then nodded, unlocking the passenger door. "Get in," I said. "I'll drop you at the next truck stop." She climbed in, thanking me over and over. As we pulled back onto the highway, she fidgeted with her phone, glancing at it nervously. It was odd, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just shaken up from being stranded. I'd be too if I were her. We drove in silence for a few minutes. The road stretched out ahead, empty. Then I noticed something strange, a car behind us. It wasn't unusual to see another car on the highway, but this one was following too closely. I kept checking the rearview mirror, and the car stayed at the same distance, like it was pacing us. "You see that car?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She stiffened, glancing quickly behind us. "Yeah, weird. Something felt off. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it." The woman shifted in her seat, gripping her phone tightly. That's when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen for just a second before tilting it away from me, like she didn't want me to see. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of the message. My heart dropped. The text read, "We're right behind you." I felt my chest tighten. Was she in on something? Was this all a setup? My mind raced. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, and I slowed down just a bit. The car behind us slowed too. I had to think fast. If they were planning something, I needed to act before it was too late. I noticed a gas station up ahead, a small one. Not too busy, but it had lights and cameras. I knew what I had to do. As I pulled into the gas station, I parked close to the entrance, where the lights were brightest. "I need to use the restroom," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You stay here. I'll just be a minute." She nodded, looking a bit confused but didn't argue. I grabbed my keys and jumped out, locking the door behind me before she could follow. I rushed inside, heart pounding in my chest. My hands were shaking as I asked the clerk to call the police. "She's part of something," I said in a hushed tone. "There's a car following us. I think they're planning to rob me." The clerk nodded, his face serious. He dialed the cops, and within minutes, 2 patrol cars showed up. The officers approached my truck cautiously, guns drawn. They pulled the woman out and started questioning her. That's when the car that had been following us tried to take off. But the cops were ready. They stopped the vehicle, finding 2 men inside armed. Turns out, the woman was part of a group that had been targeting truckers. They'd lure drivers with someone in distress, then rob them at gunpoint in remote areas. I don't even want to think about what would have happened if I hadn't seen that message. I didn't finish that haul that night. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and my mind kept replaying the whole thing. I've been on the road for years, seen a lot of strange things, but that night reminded me just how dangerous it can be out here. You never really know who's waving for help on the side of the road. I still drive trucks, but I don't stop for anyone anymore. My name's Danny Harper, and I'm 34 years old. I've been driving trucks for over a decade, based out of St. Louis, Missouri. I've hauled just about everything: furniture, groceries, even hazardous materials. But what happened on one particular job still gives me nightmares. It was a late Thursday afternoon when I got a call from a dispatcher I'd never worked with before. The offer was too good to pass up. They needed someone to transport a sealed, refrigerated container across state lines, just a simple trip from Missouri to Nevada. The pay, almost double what I usually earned. They said I didn't need to worry about what was inside, just to keep the refrigeration running. That's it. I didn't ask questions. The money was good, and I figured it was probably expensive medical supplies or food that needed to stay cold. I picked up the trailer at a shady-looking warehouse on the outskirts of town. The guys loading it up barely looked at me, like they were in a rush. One of them handed me a clipboard, signed the paperwork, and told me to hit the road. Something about it felt off, but I brushed it off. Time was money, and I wasn't about to turn down a well-paying job. The first couple of hours went by smoothly. I had my music playing, the road was clear, and the hum of the refrigeration unit behind me was the only reminder of the cargo I was carrying. But somewhere around the halfway point, the refrigeration unit started acting up. The green light on the dashboard, which was supposed to stay steady, started flickering. Then it turned red. I pulled over at the next rest stop, stepped out, and walked around to check it out. As soon as I got near the container, I noticed a strange smell, faint at first, but growing stronger the closer I got. It wasn't the smell of spoiled food. It was something far worse, like rot, but heavier, more sickening. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe something in the refrigeration was leaking. I fiddled with the controls, hoping to get the temperature back down, but the unit wouldn't respond. The temperature inside kept climbing and the smell became unbearable. I knew I had to check the cargo. If it was something perishable, I could be in big trouble if it spoiled. I hesitated for a moment, then grabbed a crowbar from my toolkit and pried open the container's door. The seal broke with a hiss, and the stench hit me like a wall. I gagged, my stomach turning as I shined my flashlight inside. Rows of bodies, stacked on top of each other, wrapped in plastic, decomposing. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My hands started shaking, and I felt like I was going to throw up. These weren't just corpses, they were packed tightly like cargo. There had to be dozens of them. I staggered back, the flashlight slipping from my hand. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding out of my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. How the hell did I end up transporting dead bodies? Who were they? My mind raced with questions, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to call the cops. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be able to forget, but deep down, I know I never will. With trembling hands, I dialed 911, trying to explain what I had found. The dispatcher sounded calm, but I could hear the urgency in her voice when she asked for my location. I gave it to her, and she told me to stay put and wait for the authorities. Minutes felt like hours. I couldn't stop pacing around my truck, replaying what I'd seen inside that container. Finally, the cops arrived. 2 cruisers, lights flashing, no sirens. They approached me cautiously, asking me to step away from the truck. I told them everything. How I didn't know what I was hauling, how the refrigeration unit had broken, and how I'd discovered the bodies. They pried open the container again, and the look on their faces confirmed what I already knew. One of the officers pulled me aside, his expression grim. "Son," he said quietly, "you've been part of something bigger than you realize. This looks like a human trafficking operation." My stomach dropped. Human trafficking? How was that even possible? The officer went on to explain that these bodies were likely being transported for illegal organ harvesting. They weren't just victims, they were commodities. I could barely comprehend it. How could I have been so blind? I didn't ask questions when I should have. I trusted the wrong people. The authorities searched the container and confirmed that all the bodies were beyond saving lifeless, treated like cargo. They took my statement, but there wasn't much else I could tell them. I was just the driver, unknowingly caught in the middle of something horrific. The people behind it? They were never caught. The company I'd worked for? Disappeared without a trace. The warehouse I'd picked the load up from was empty by the time the cops checked it out. I quit trucking the next day. I couldn't do it anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bodies, innocent people who were trafficked and killed for profit. I can still smell that stench, even now. My name is Jake Miller and I'm 42 years old. I've been driving trucks for over 20 years now, based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I've seen a lot on the road, but this one night in the mountains still sticks with me. It was a typical late-night run, hauling a load through the winding roads of the Rockies. The air was crisp, the roads were dark, and the only sound was the rumble of my engine. I was about halfway through my route when I noticed a couple of trucks ahead of me. I wasn't expecting company, but it's always nice to have someone to chat with on the CB to keep awake. I keyed the mic. "Hey, anyone out there? Looks like we're all headed the same way." One of the drivers responded with a chuckle. "Yeah, we're all in the same boat, bud. Welcome to the convoy." There were 3 of them. We exchanged names, though I can't remember them now, and kept each other company as we navigated the winding roads. It felt good to know I wasn't alone out there, especially with how tricky those mountain roads can be at night. The miles flew by as we talked. They shared stories from the road, and I did the same, but then something weird started happening. As we neared the next rest stop, I noticed the last truck in the convoy suddenly disappear from my mirrors. I figured he might have pulled over for some reason, maybe engine trouble, or he needed to stop. I didn't think too much of it at first. "Hey, you guys see where the last truck went?" I asked over the CB. No answer. I tried again. "Anyone hear me?" Silence. I was starting to feel uneasy. The other 2 trucks were still up ahead, their taillights flickering in the distance. But something about the quiet made my skin crawl. As we got closer to the rest stop, the second truck disappeared too, just like the first one. No brake lights, no sign of him pulling over, just gone. Now I was getting nervous. I grabbed the CB again, my voice shaky. "What's going on? Where the hell did you all go?" Nothing. By the time I reached the rest stop, only 1 truck remained in front of me. I pulled in, expecting to see the others parked there, but the lot was empty. Just me and that 1 truck. I watched as the driver pulled in and parked a little further down. I parked my rig and jumped out, hoping to talk to the last driver, but as I approached his truck, I realized the cab was empty. There was no sign of him anywhere. My heart was pounding. This didn't make any sense. I ran back to my truck, locked the doors, and grabbed my phone. I dialed my dispatcher, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, there were some other trucks on my route tonight. I can't reach any of them, and I think something's wrong." My dispatcher paused for a moment before replying. "Jake, you're the only one scheduled on that route tonight. No other trucks should have been out there." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? I was with 3 other trucks. We were talking on the CB the whole time." "There's no one else out there, Jake. Maybe you're just tired. Get some rest, okay?" I hung up, staring at my phone in disbelief. Had I imagined the whole thing? No, that wasn't possible. I heard their voices, saw their trucks, but now, standing there in the empty lot, I wasn't so sure anymore. I sat in my truck, engine off, staring out into the darkness. The rest stop was quiet, too quiet. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. I never saw those trucks again. And to this day, I don't know if they were real or if something else took them off the road that night. Whatever it was, it left me with a feeling I'll never forget. Like the road can swallow you whole, and no one would ever know.